You know your marriage is fading when your wife starts leaving fertility brochures on your nightstand like some twisted room service menu. That's exactly what I found this morning. Glossy pamphlets about IVF procedures scattered across my side of the bed like confetti at a funeral. My name is Miles Carter, and I'm a 40-year-old civil engineer who thought he'd built a solid foundation with his wife. Turns out I was working with defective materials from the start. "Morning, honey," Jocelyn said, not looking up from her phone as she sipped her organic green smoothie. At 38, she still looked like the pharmaceutical sales rep who could charm doctors into prescribing anything. Problem was, she'd been using those same manipulation skills on me for 5 years. "Interesting reading material you left me," I said, holding up a brochure titled Advanced Reproductive Technologies, Your Path to Parenthood. She finally looked up, her blue eyes bright with something I couldn't quite identify. "Oh, that. I've been thinking about our future, Miles. About what we want to build together." The irony wasn't lost on me. I built bridges and buildings for a living, things meant to last, but apparently I'd failed to construct anything permanent with my own wife. "We've talked about kids before," I said carefully, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, a gift from my sister Nina that read, "World's Okayest Engineer." "I thought we agreed to wait until what? Until we're too old? Until my biological clock stops ticking entirely?" Jocelyn's voice had that edge it got when she was building up to something big. "Miles, I'm 38. We can't keep putting this off." I sat down across from her at our kitchen table, studying her face. After 5 years of marriage, I knew her tells. The way she touched her collarbone when she was nervous. How she avoided eye contact when she wasn't being completely honest. Right now, she was doing both. "What's really going on, Jock?" She set down her smoothie and reached for another brochure. This one had a couple on the cover, beaming as they held a baby. The man looked nothing like me. Tall, athletic, with the kind of jaw that belonged on magazine covers. "I've been researching options," she said. "Did you know that genetic compatibility plays a huge role in successful pregnancies? And that some genetic profiles are simply superior for producing healthy offspring?" The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Superior how? Well, take Blake, for instance. Blake, her ex-husband. The name that had been creeping into our conversations more and more lately, like a slow leak in a pipe that eventually floods your entire house. Blake has incredible genetics, Miles. He was an Olympic rower, remember? 6'4", perfect bone density, no family history of diabetes or heart disease. His children would have every advantage. I set down my coffee mug with more force than necessary. His children? Hypothetically speaking. But she wasn't meeting my eyes again. I'm just saying, from a purely scientific standpoint, some genetic material is more valuable than others. That's when it clicked. The late-night phone calls she thought I didn't notice. The way she'd been watching documentaries about Olympic athletes. The sudden interest in genetic optimization that had nothing to do with our actual relationship. "Jocelyn, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" She finally looked at me directly, and I saw something in her expression that made me freeze. Determination. She'd already made up her mind about something, and I was just now being brought into the loop. Blake stored genetic material before his Olympic training. You know, in case the intense physical demands affected his fertility later. It's still viable, Miles, still available. The room went quiet except for the hum of our refrigerator and the sound of my world quietly imploding. "You want to have a baby using your ex-husband's sperm?" "I want to give our child the best possible start in life," she said, as if that was a reasonable distinction. "Blake and I may not have worked out as a couple, but his genetics are undeniably superior. Combined with my own athletic background, I was a college swimmer, remember? We could create something truly exceptional." I stared at her, wondering when the woman I married had turned into someone who spoke about creating children like she was designing a custom car. "What about my genetics, Jocelyn? What about the child being actually mine?" She reached across the table and patted my hand like I was a confused child. "Oh, Miles, you'd still be the father in every way that matters. You'd raise the child, love the child, provide for the child. But wouldn't you want to give that child every possible advantage? The best possible foundation?" "Foundation." She was using my own professional language against me, talking about genetic material like it was concrete and rebar. "Have you talked to Blake about this?" A flush crept up her neck. "We've discussed it. He's open to the idea for the right circumstances." "The right circumstances being what, exactly?" "Well, he'd want to be involved, naturally. Not as a father figure, but as a genetic contributor with a vested interest in the outcome." I felt like I was watching a building collapse in slow motion, seeing each support beam fail one by one until the whole structure came crashing down. So, let me get this straight. You want me to raise a child that's genetically his and yours, while he maintains some kind of involvement in our family because he's the biological father. You're making it sound more complicated than it is. Am I? Because it sounds like you want to have Blake's baby with my financial support and emotional labor. Jocelyn's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something ugly underneath. Contempt. She actually looked at me with contempt, like I was too stupid to understand the brilliant plan she'd concocted. Miles, be practical. Blake is 6'4" with Olympic-level athletic ability. You're 5'10", and your biggest physical achievement is climbing 3 flights of stairs without getting winded. If we're going to bring a child into this world, shouldn't we give them the best possible genetic foundation? There it was. The truth, delivered with the same clinical efficiency she used to sell pharmaceuticals to doctors. I wasn't good enough. My genetics weren't worthy. I was just the financial provider for her eugenics experiment. I stood up slowly, my engineer's mind already calculating load-bearing capacities and stress points. But this time, I was analyzing my marriage instead of a building. That's quite a request, Jocelyn. She smiled, probably thinking she'd won me over with her logical argument. I knew you'd understand once you thought about it rationally. Blake has already agreed to meet with us to discuss the logistics. Maybe this weekend? I walked to my home office and pulled out a thick manila envelope from my desk drawer. I'd prepared it 6 months ago, after the first time I'd caught her texting Blake at midnight. Call it an engineer's paranoia, but I always like to have contingency plans. I returned to the kitchen and slid the envelope across the table to her. Here's my response. Jocelyn's smile faltered as she opened the envelope. Her face went white as she read the first document. What is this? That, my dear wife, is a post-nuptial agreement you signed 3 years ago. Remember? You said it was just a formality when my lawyer suggested it after I got that big promotion. You signed it without reading it, just like you sign everything. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. I don't understand. Page 4, Section 12, the Biological Indemnity Clause. It states that if either party pursues reproduction using genetic material from outside the marriage, they forfeit all claims to marital assets and property. The color drained from her face completely now. Page 7 details the infidelity provisions. Emotional affairs, planning reproduction with third parties, and forging spousal consent for medical procedures all constitute grounds for immediate annulment with asset forfeiture. Forging consent? I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. This is the IVF consent form I found in your purse yesterday, the one with my signature already filled in. Funny thing about being married to an engineer, Jocelyn. We notice when signatures don't match. We also know how to document evidence. She stared at the phone screen like it was a snake about to bite her. The last document in that envelope is a petition for annulment based on fraud, already filed with the court. My lawyer assures me it's airtight. Jocelyn's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't be serious. Absolutely serious. You want Blake's superior genetics? Go ahead, but you'll be pursuing that particular scientific experiment from your own apartment, with your own money and your own credit rating. Miles, please, we can work this out. I was just exploring options. No, Jocelyn. You were planning to commit reproductive fraud while making me pay for the privilege of raising another man's child. The only thing you were exploring was how far you could push me before I pushed back. I stood up and straightened my tie. I have a meeting with a client this morning. When I get home tonight, I expect you to be gone. Your personal items will be packed and waiting by the door. Everything else stays here. You can't throw me out of my own house. Actually, I can. Check page 9 of the post-nup. The house is in my name, purchased before our marriage with my inheritance from my father. You have no legal claim to it. For the first time since I'd known her, Jocelyn Carter was completely speechless. Oh, and Jocelyn, you might want to call Blake and let him know that his genetic contribution services won't be needed after all. Unless, of course, he's planning to provide child support for a baby that doesn't exist yet. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, leaving my wife sitting at our kitchen table with the ruins of her master plan scattered around her like debris from a controlled demolition. The thing about controlled demolitions is that they look effortless from the outside. You see a building standing one moment and reduced to rubble the next, and it seems almost magical. What you don't see is the weeks of careful planning, the precise placement of charges, the mathematical calculations required to bring down a structure without damaging everything around it. I thought about that as I sat in my truck outside Brennan Construction, trying to focus on my meeting with Jim Brennan about the new shopping center project. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the house. 17 missed calls from Jocelyn, 12 text messages, and 3 voicemails I hadn't bothered to listen to. The passenger door opened and my sister Nina climbed in, clutching 2 coffee cups and wearing the predatory smile she usually reserved for opposing counsel. "I got your text," she said, handing me a cup. "Please tell me you actually went through with it." Nina Carter Morrison was everything Jocelyn pretended to be. Smart, successful, and genuinely intimidating when she needed to be. At 35, she was a partner at Morrison, Klein & Associates, specializing in family law. She was also the only person who'd seen through Jocelyn's act from day one. I gave her the envelope this morning. And? She went through all 5 stages of grief in about 30 seconds, currently stuck somewhere between anger and bargaining, based on the number of times my phone's been ringing. Nina's grin widened. I knew that post-nuptial agreement would come in handy. Best $3,000 you ever spent on legal fees. You were right about the biological indemnity clause. She had no idea what she was signing. Of course she didn't. Jocelyn never read anything that wasn't a pharmaceutical sales brochure or a magazine article about her ex-husband's rowing achievements. Nina took a sip of her coffee. "Speaking of which, have you heard from Blake yet?" "Not yet, but I'm sure Jocelyn's calling him right now, explaining how her brilliant plan just imploded." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Derek, my best friend and the only person outside of Nina who knew what was happening. "Derek. Heard through the grapevine that Jocelyn called in sick to work today. Also heard she was crying in her car in the company parking lot at 9 a.m. Thought you'd want to know." Derek worked security consulting for half the businesses in town, which meant he had better intelligence networks than the FBI. If Jocelyn was crying in public, word would spread fast. "She's already falling apart," I told Nina, showing her the text. "Good. The faster she unravels, the easier the annulment process becomes. Emotional instability supports our fraud claims." Nina had always been ruthlessly practical, which made her an excellent lawyer and a terrible person to have as an enemy. I was grateful she was on my side. "There's something else," I said. "I found evidence that she's been planning this for months. Bank statements showing payments to a fertility clinic, emails with Blake about genetic optimization, even research into private schools for gifted children. She was shopping for your replacement before she even told you about it. Worse than that, she was shopping for my genetic replacement while planning to keep me around as the financial provider." Nina's expression darkened. "That's not just fraud, Miles. That's sociopathic." My phone rang again. This time it was Jim Brennan. "Miles, I hate to do this, but I need to reschedule our meeting. Something urgent came up." "No problem, Jim. How about tomorrow?" "Actually, let me call you back. There's been some complications with the project." He hung up without explanation, leaving me staring at my phone. "That's weird," I said. "Jim Brennan just canceled our meeting, said there were complications." Nina frowned. "What kind of complications?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with another call. This time it was my boss, Robert Chen, from the engineering firm. "Miles, we need to talk. Can you come in this afternoon?" "Sure, Robert. What's going on?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. How about 3 o'clock? 2 mysterious calls in 5 minutes was starting to feel like a pattern, and not a good one. "Nina, I think Jocelyn might be doing more than just calling me." "What do you mean?" "I think she's calling my clients. My boss wants to see me this afternoon, and Jim Brennan just canceled our meeting with some vague excuse about complications." Nina's lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. "What could she possibly tell them that would affect your work?" "I don't know, but Jocelyn's been to company events with me. She knows who my clients are, who my boss is. If she's desperate enough." My phone rang again. This time it was Tom Rodriguez from the city planning department, another client I'd been working with for months. "Miles, I just got a very disturbing call from your wife. She said there were some personal issues affecting your work quality, and that I should be aware of potential problems with your current projects." The bottom of my stomach dropped out. "Tom? Whatever she told you." "She mentioned something about mental health issues and erratic behavior. Look, I know Jocelyn, and this doesn't sound like her usual style. What's going on?" I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Jocelyn and I are getting divorced, Tom. She's upset and apparently trying to damage my professional relationships out of spite." "Ah, hell, Miles, I'm sorry. Divorce makes people do crazy things." "Yeah, it does. But my personal problems won't affect my work. I can promise you that." "I know they won't. You've been nothing but professional for the 3 years we've worked together. I just wanted to give you a heads up that she's making calls." After I hung up, Nina was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my office. We need to file an emergency restraining order to stop her from contacting your clients and employers." "Can we do that?" interference with business relationships, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Oh, we can do a lot more than that. While Nina made her call, I tried to process what was happening. In the span of 6 hours, Jocelyn had gone from asking me to raise another man's child to actively trying to destroy my career. The woman I'd been married to for 5 years was revealing herself to be someone I'd never really known at all. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Blake. We need to talk. Jocelyn told me what you did. You're making a mistake. I showed the text to Nina, who had just finished her call. Well, look who's joining the party, she said. What are you going to do? I thought about it for a moment, then typed back, happy to talk. Let's meet somewhere public. How about the coffee shop on 5th Street? 1 hour. You're going to meet with him? I want to see what he has to say. Plus, it'll give me a chance to explain the legal realities of the situation. Maybe he'll convince Jocelyn to back off once he understands what she's really up against. Nina shook her head. Miles, you're assuming he's rational. But rational people don't agree to father children with other men's wives. Maybe, but I'd rather deal with this head-on than let it fester. Fine, but I'm coming with you. Nina, non-negotiable. Blake's 6'4" and used to be an Olympic athlete. You're 5'10", and your biggest physical achievement is climbing 3 flights of stairs without getting winded. I stared at her. Did you just quote my wife's insult back to me? Your soon-to-be ex-wife. And yes, I did. Because even though she's a manipulative sociopath, she wasn't wrong about the physical mismatch. An hour later, we were sitting in Grounded Coffee on 5th Street, waiting for Blake to arrive. I'd chosen a table near the back where we could talk privately but still be visible to the other customers. Blake walked in exactly on time, and I had to admit that Jocelyn hadn't been exaggerating about his physical presence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of athletic success. He was also scanning the coffee shop like he was looking for threats, which struck me as odd. He spotted us and walked over, his expression grim. Miles Carter, I assume. That's right, this is my sister Nina. She's my attorney. Blake's eyes narrowed as he looked at Nina. Attorney, this is supposed to be a conversation between men. Actually, Nina said pleasantly, this is a conversation between people involved in a legal dispute. And since I'm the one handling Miles's annulment case, I have every right to be here. Blake sat down heavily, clearly not happy about the situation. Look, Miles, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jocelyn explained what happened this morning, and I think you're overreacting. Overreacting to what exactly? She was just exploring options for having children. It's not like she was cheating on you or anything. I stared at him. Blake, she asked me to raise your biological child while you maintained involvement in our family. How is that not cheating? Because it would be a clinical procedure, medical, not emotional. Nina leaned forward. Mr. Hargrove, are you familiar with the legal definition of adultery? This isn't adultery. No one's having closeness. Actually, adultery includes any voluntary intercourse between a married person and someone other than their spouse, but it also includes deliberate attempts to conceive children outside the marriage, regardless of the method used. Blake's confidence wavered slightly. Miles would still be the legal father. Only if he consented, Nina continued, which he didn't. What Jocelyn was proposing constitutes reproductive fraud, which is grounds for annulment in this state. Look, Blake said, turning back to me. Jocelyn's upset and not thinking clearly. She called me this morning crying about some legal papers you gave her. Can't we work this out like adults? We could have, I said, if she'd approached me honestly instead of forging my signature on medical consent forms. Blake went pale. She didn't mention anything about forged signatures. She also probably didn't mention that she's been planning this for months, or that she's currently calling my clients and employers trying to sabotage my career. She's doing what? Nina slid a piece of paper across the table. This is a restraining order we filed this afternoon, prohibiting your ex-wife from contacting Miles's business associates or interfering with his professional relationships. Blake read the document, his expression growing darker. Jesus, Jocelyn, what the hell are you doing? You didn't know about the harassment campaign? I asked. No, I didn't know about any of this. She called me this morning saying you were being unreasonable about starting a family and that you'd threatened to divorce her over it. That's not exactly how it happened. Blake rubbed his forehead. Look, Miles, I'm sorry about this mess. I never should have agreed to even discuss it with her. But you did agree to it. She made it sound like you were on board with the idea, like it was something you'd both decided together. Nina and I exchanged glances. Blake, Nina said carefully, how long have you and Jocelyn been in contact? About 6 months. She reached out after she saw an article about my fitness consulting business. 6 months, I repeated. And in all that time, she never mentioned that I didn't know about this plan? Blake's silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, Nina said, pulling out another document. Miles is filing for annulment based on fraud. Jocelyn will lose all claims to marital property and assets. If you continue to encourage or assist her in this scheme, you'll be named as a co-conspirator in the fraud case. Wait, I could be sued? You could be criminally charged, Nina corrected. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony. Blake stood up abruptly. I need to think about this. Take all the time you need, I said. But Blake, you might want to consider the possibility that Jocelyn hasn't been entirely honest with you either. After he left, Nina and I sat in silence for a few minutes. That went better than expected, she finally said. You think he'll convince her to back off? I think he just realized he's been played as badly as you were. The question is whether Jocelyn will accept reality or double down on the crazy. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jocelyn. Blake told me what you said. You're going to regret this, Miles. I'm not going down without a fight. I showed the text to Nina. Well, she said, I guess that answers that question. The next morning, I woke up in my own house for the first time in 5 years without wondering what mood my wife would be in. The silence was unsettling at first. No sounds of Jocelyn getting ready for work, no passive-aggressive comments about my coffee-making skills, no pharmaceutical sales calls at 7 a.m. Then I remembered why she wasn't there, and the silence became beautiful. I was halfway through my first peaceful cup of coffee when my phone rang. It was Robert Chen, my boss. Miles, I need you to come in early today. We have a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that requires HR and possibly legal counsel. How soon can you be here? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Robert's office across from him and Janet Walsh from Human Resources. Janet looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Miles, Robert began, we received some very serious allegations about your conduct yesterday. Let me guess. Jocelyn called. Your wife contacted our main office and spoke with several people, including the managing partners. She made some very specific claims about your mental state and professional competence. Janet opened a folder and pulled out what looked like a transcript. She alleged that you've been exhibiting erratic behavior, making threats, and that your personal problems are affecting your work quality. She also, Robert continued, suggested that you might be having some kind of breakdown and that we should be aware of potential safety issues on job sites. I felt my jaw clench. And what did you tell her? We told her that personnel matters are confidential and that if she had genuine safety concerns, she should contact the appropriate authorities. But that's not the end of it, is it? Janet shook her head. She's also contacted 3 of your current clients directly, making similar allegations. The Morrison Shopping Center project, the 5th Street Bridge renovation, and the new municipal building. Jesus. It gets worse, Robert said. She told the Morrison people that you've been drinking on the job and that they should request a different engineer. That's completely false. We know it is, but Miles, we have to take allegations like this seriously, even when they're obviously motivated by personal issues. Janet leaned forward. We need you to understand that this puts us in a difficult position. We can't ignore safety allegations, even when we're confident they're unfounded. What are you saying? We're saying, Robert said carefully, that you need to resolve this situation quickly. If your wife continues to interfere with company business, we'll have to consider our options. Are you suspending me? Not yet, but we are requiring you to undergo a fitness for duty evaluation, standard procedure when there are allegations about an employee's mental state. I stared at them both. You want me to see a psychiatrist to prove I'm not crazy. We want you to see a company-approved physician who can certify that you're fit for duty. It's just a formality, but it protects both you and the company. After I left the office, I called Nina immediately. They can't require a psychiatric evaluation based on unsubstantiated allegations from an estranged spouse, she said. Apparently they can if it involves safety concerns on construction sites. Damn, that's actually smart on their part, and incredibly vindictive on Jocelyn's part. Nina, she's trying to destroy my career. If word gets out that I had to undergo a psychiatric evaluation, it'll follow me for years. Then we need to stop this before it goes any further. I'm filing an emergency motion for an expanded restraining order. And Miles? Yeah? We're going to destroy her in court. What she's doing isn't just harassment, it's economic warfare. I was driving home when Derek called. Dude, you need to get down to Murphy's Pub right now. Why? Because your wife is here with Blake, and they're having a very loud, very public argument about you. Murphy's Pub was the unofficial gathering place for half the construction workers, engineers, and city employees in town. If Jocelyn was making a scene there, everyone I worked with would hear about it. What are they arguing about? From what I can hear, Blake wants to back out of whatever scheme they cooked up, and Jocelyn is trying to convince him that you're bluffing about the legal stuff. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Miles, maybe you should just let them implode on their own. Not when they're doing it in front of my professional colleagues. Murphy's was crowded with the usual lunch crowd when I walked in. Derek was sitting at the bar, nursing a beer and watching the show. He nodded toward a corner booth where Jocelyn and Blake were indeed having an animated discussion. How long have they been at it? I asked, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. About 20 minutes. She's been getting progressively louder. I could see why. Jocelyn's face was flushed, and she was gesturing emphatically while Blake sat back with his arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. Completely overreacting, I heard her say. Miles is all talk. He doesn't have the backbone to actually follow through with any of this legal nonsense. Jocelyn, you didn't tell me you forged his signature. That's a crime. It's a technicality. No jury would convict a woman for wanting to have children. Several people at nearby tables were starting to stare. I recognized at least 3 guys from various construction sites I'd worked on. Blake leaned forward and lowered his voice, but Jocelyn wasn't taking the hint. You're being paranoid, she said loudly. Miles is a nobody, a mediocre engineer with average abilities who should be grateful I'm willing to raise the bar. That's when I decided I'd heard enough. I walked over to their table and sat down uninvited. Both of them froze. Hi, honey, I said pleasantly. Having a nice lunch? Jocelyn's face went white, then red. Miles, what are you doing here? Oh, just grabbing lunch with Derek. Imagine my surprise when I heard my wife discussing my genetic inadequacies with her ex-husband in front of half the people I work with. Blake started to stand up. Look, Miles. Sit down, Blake. We're all going to have a civilized conversation. You can't tell him what to do, Jocelyn snapped. And you can't intimidate us into backing down. Intimidate you? I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I'm not intimidating anyone. In fact, I'm recording this conversation for legal purposes, as is my right in a public place. Jocelyn's eyes widened. You can't record us without our consent. Actually, I can. Single-party consent state, remember? I learned that from my lawyer's sister. Blake was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Maybe we should continue this somewhere else. No, I said. I think this is the perfect place. Jocelyn seems to enjoy discussing our private business in public, so let's discuss it. Stop being dramatic, Jocelyn said, but her voice was shakier now. Dramatic? You mean like calling my boss and telling him I'm mentally unstable? Or calling my clients and suggesting I'm drinking on the job? The conversations at nearby tables had stopped completely. Everyone was listening now. I was concerned about your behavior. You were concerned about your meal ticket disappearing when I divorced you for fraud. Blake finally spoke up. Fraud? Oh, you didn't know. Jocelyn forged my signature on IVF consent forms. She's been planning to have your baby with my money for months, all while lying to both of us about what the other person knew. That's not, Jocelyn started. It's not what? Not fraud? Not forgery? Not reproductive deception? I turned to Blake. Did you know she told me you were open to the idea when she first brought this up? Blake shook his head slowly. Did you know she told me that you'd already agreed to meet with us to discuss logistics? Jesus, Jocelyn. And did you know, I continued, that she's been researching private schools for your hypothetical genetically superior children while planning to cut me out of any actual parenting decisions? Blake was staring at Jocelyn like he'd never seen her before. Is that true? It's more complicated than he's making it sound. It's really not, I interrupted. You wanted to use Blake's genetic material to create a child that I would pay for and raise, while he maintained involvement because of his biological contribution. That's not complicated. That's fraud. The entire pub had gone quiet now. Even the bartender was listening. Furthermore, I continued, when I refused to participate in the scheme, you decided to try to destroy my career out of spite. You called my boss, my clients, and God knows who else, spreading lies about my mental health and professional competence. I was trying to protect myself. From what? From the consequences of your own actions? I stood up and looked around the pub at all the familiar faces. I want everyone here to know that Jocelyn and I are getting divorced. The reason is that she attempted to commit reproductive fraud by forging my signature on medical documents so she could have her ex-husband's child without my knowledge or consent. Jocelyn's face was now completely red. You bastard. I also want everyone to know that any allegations she's made about my mental health, professional competence, or fitness for duty are false and motivated by spite. If anyone has questions about my work quality or reliability, I encourage you to speak with me directly. I picked up my phone and turned off the recording. Blake, I suggest you distance yourself from this situation before you become a co-defendant in a fraud case. Jocelyn, I suggest you stop calling my colleagues before you find yourself facing criminal charges for harassment and interference with business relationships. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Jocelyn, your personal belongings are packed and sitting on the front porch. The locks have been changed. Any further communication should go through my attorney. The silence in Murphy's pub was deafening as I walked out. Derek caught up with me in the parking lot. Dude, that was either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both. But at least now everyone knows the truth instead of whatever version Jocelyn's been spreading around town. Blake looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Good. Maybe he'll finally realize what he got himself into. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. Emergency restraining order approved. Jocelyn is now legally prohibited from contacting your employers or clients. Violation is contempt of court. I showed the text to Derek. Perfect timing, he said. Right after you publicly humiliated her in front of half the town. She humiliated herself. I just made sure everyone understood what was really happening. So what's next? Next, I go home to my empty house and enjoy the peace and quiet. For the first time in 5 years, I don't have to worry about what mood my wife is in or what scheme she's cooking up. And if she violates the restraining order, then she goes to jail. And honestly, after what she's put me through, I'm almost hoping she's stupid enough to try. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office reviewing the final annulment papers when Nina delivered the news I'd been waiting for. It's over, she said, sliding a document across her desk. Jocelyn signed everything. No contest, no appeals, no further claims on marital property. Just like that? Just like that. Turns out that public humiliation at Murphy's pub was the final straw. Blake cut off all contact with her the next day, and without her genetic upgrade plan, she had no reason to keep fighting. I picked up the annulment decree and read through it. 5 years of marriage, dissolved as if it had never happened. All because my wife had decided my genetics weren't good enough for her reproductive ambitions. What about the harassment charges? Dropped, as part of the settlement. But Miles, she's required to send written apologies to your boss and all the clients she contacted. And if she ever interferes with your business again, the criminal charges get refiled automatically. Where is she now? Moved back in with her parents in Seattle. Word is she's telling everyone that you were abusive and controlling, but since half the town witnessed her meltdown at Murphy's, nobody's buying it. I leaned back in my chair and tried to process the fact that it was actually over. What about Blake? Funny you should ask. Nina pulled out another folder. Turns out Blake's been having some problems of his own. What kind of problems? The kind that happen when your ex-wife's public meltdown gets posted on social media and goes viral. Someone recorded the whole scene at Murphy's and put it on TikTok. Blake's fitness consulting business has been getting some very negative attention. She showed me her phone. The video had over 2 million views and thousands of comments, most of them expressing outrage at the idea of a man agreeing to father children with other people's wives. His corporate sponsors dropped him last week, Nina continued. Apparently they don't want to be associated with someone who participates in reproductive fraud schemes, even if he didn't know all the details. I almost feel sorry for him. Don't. He knew enough to know it was wrong. He just thought he wouldn't get caught. I signed the final documents and handed them back to Nina. So what now? Now you get on with your life. You're a free man, Miles. No alimony, no property disputes, no crazy ex-wife trying to sabotage your career. And no genetic offspring to carry on the Carter family name. Are you actually upset about that? I thought about it for a moment. No, I'm relieved. Can you imagine trying to co-parent with someone who thinks of children as genetic optimization projects? Not to mention co-parenting with Blake hovering around because of his biological investment. We walked out of Nina's office together, and I felt lighter than I had in months. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and for the first time in years, I had no idea what my future held. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Want to grab lunch? Nina asked. I'm buying. To celebrate your freedom. Actually, I have somewhere else I need to be. An hour later, I was standing in the lobby of Morrison Construction, waiting to meet with Jim Brennan about the shopping center project he'd mysteriously canceled weeks earlier. Miles! Jim came out of the elevator with a big grin on his face. Good to see you. Come on up. We have a lot to discuss. In his office, Jim poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from me. I owe you an apology, he said. When your wife called here making those allegations, I panicked. I've been in construction for 30 years, and safety is everything. I couldn't take any chances. I understand, Jim. You were protecting your project and your workers. But I should have talked to you directly instead of just canceling our meeting. I've worked with you for 3 years, and you've never given me any reason to doubt your professionalism. What changed your mind? Jim chuckled. Derek Morrison called me the day after that scene at Murphy's pub. He explained what was really going on and suggested I might want to reconsider my position. Derek called you? He also sent me a copy of the restraining order your sister filed and the documentation showing that your wife had been making false allegations. It became pretty clear that you were the victim, not the problem. Jim leaned forward. Miles, I want you to know that the shopping center project is still yours if you want it. In fact, I have 2 other projects coming up that might interest you. I appreciate that, Jim, more than you know. There's something else. Word's gotten around about what happened to you, and the reaction has been interesting. Interesting how? Interesting in that every contractor, developer, and city official in town is talking about how your wife tried to destroy your career out of spite and how you handled it with class and professionalism. Jim pulled out a business card. This is from Sarah Chen at Pacific Development. She's got a $50 million mixed-use project downtown, and she specifically asked for you to be the lead engineer. I stared at the card. She asked for me specifically? Her exact words were, I want the engineer who stood up to his crazy wife and didn't let her destroy his career. Apparently, she's been through a nasty divorce herself and respects how you handled the situation. I left Morrison Construction with 3 new project contracts and a renewed sense of confidence in my professional future. It seemed that Jocelyn's attempt to sabotage my career had actually enhanced my reputation in the industry. My phone rang as I was walking to my truck. It was Derek. Hey, how'd the meeting with Jim go? Good, really good. Thanks for making that call. No problem, that's what friends do. Derek, can I ask you something? Shoot. Did you really think I was going to let Jocelyn destroy everything I'd worked for? Honestly, I was worried for a while there. She caught you off guard with that genetic superiority bullshit, and I thought you might cave just to keep the peace. What changed your mind? When you walked into Murphy's that day and sat down at their table like you owned the place, that's when I knew you were done being pushed around. That evening, I was sitting on my back porch with a beer, watching the sunset, and thinking about the future, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Blake. I wanted to apologize for my part in what happened. I should have known better. I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Me? Apology accepted. We were both manipulated. Blake, can I ask you something? Me. Sure. Blake, how did you know about the post-nuptial agreement and all that legal stuff? Me. I'm an engineer, Blake. I plan for structural failures before they happen. Blake, smart. I wish I'd been that smart. Me. What are you going to do now? Blake, start over, I guess. Move somewhere where people haven't seen that video of me agreeing to father children with other men's wives. Me. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad guy, just someone who got caught up in Jocelyn's manipulation. Blake. Thanks. That means more than you know. Me. Blake? Blake. Yeah? Me. Next time someone asks you to be a genetic donor for their marriage improvement project, maybe run it by a lawyer first. Blake. Definitely. And Miles? Blake. Yeah? Blake. Your genetics are probably better than mine anyway. At least you're smart enough not to get involved in schemes like this. I set down my phone and took another sip of beer. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My house was quiet, my career was secure, and my future was my own to determine. For the first time in 5 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. 6 months later, I was reviewing blueprints for the Pacific Development Project when my phone rang. It was Nina. Miles, you're not going to believe this. Try me. Jocelyn's in the news. What kind of news? The bad kind. She was arrested in Seattle for insurance fraud. Apparently, she's been filing false claims about medical treatments she never received. Jesus. It gets better. The investigation started when her insurance company noticed she was claiming fertility treatments from a clinic that doesn't exist. I sat back in my chair. She was still trying to scam her way into having Blake's baby? Looks like it. The police found forged medical documents, fake clinic letterheads, and a whole elaborate scheme to collect insurance money for procedures she was never actually having. What about Blake? Clean. He's been in Colorado for months, working as a ski instructor and staying as far away from this mess as possible. How much trouble is she in? Felony fraud charges. She's looking at serious prison time if convicted. I thought about the woman I'd been married to for 5 years, the woman who'd wanted to improve our future with superior genetics. now sitting in a jail cell because she couldn't accept that her scheme had failed. Miles, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Just thinking about how different things could have been if I'd actually agreed to her plan. You'd be raising another man's child while your wife committed insurance fraud to pay for more fertility treatments. Does that sound like a life you'd want? Not even close. Then you made the right choice. You stood up for yourself, protected your assets, and got out before she could drag you down with her. After I hung up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the city skyline. Construction cranes dotted the horizon, each one representing a project I might work on, a building I might design, a future I was helping to build. I thought about foundations and structural integrity, about the importance of using quality materials and sound engineering principles. I thought about the difference between something that looks good on the surface and something that's built to last. And I thought about how sometimes the best thing you can do when you discover defective materials is to tear down the whole structure and start over with something better. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen at Pacific Development. Miles, the city approved our permits. Ready to build something amazing? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Let's build something that will last.